Horizon Chess Home Suji Reacts, and this is the Japanese tank meme by the channel Potential History. A look at Japanese tanks and why they are what they are. Okay, so I saw the Italian tank meme from this channel, Potential History, and yeah, that was just fucked up. The whole video was fucked up. Obviously, the Italian tank sucked, but it was more fucked up for the soldiers, basically. Because every time they took up the arms, right, trying to fight, right? I know when I say in that video that, you know, anybody who takes up arm, it's just like they do that to defend their country, and, you know, yeah. So the incompetence is not part of it, and obviously, you know, I guess someone told me in the comments that it's not just that they didn't just enlist. Sometimes they, you know, lots of times they also get conscripted. Regardless of what the reasoning were, once they are in the army, they are not gonna, you know, muck around, let's just say. So they are not going to be the one who's going to be, like, you know, incompetent in that way, right? They are all in because it's a war, for fuck's sake. So yeah, obviously Mussolini basically is the core reason, right, behind everything, the chain of command, why the tanks sucked. But I don't know much about Japanese tank in World War II. I'm pretty sure this is going to be about World War II, right? But apparently Japanese tanks suck too, since there's a video about Japanese tank meme for this channel. But I don't know, we'll see. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, so I know which type of videos to react to more. You know, I don't know, sometimes should I react to history videos, should I react to video game videos, I don't know. It's very confusing because I cover lots of different type of genres, right? That's why I'm trying to create another channel, right? I have to think of like what channel I want to create and what content I will put. Will I make that information history thing, and will I make this channel game and just entertainment? I don't know. So I have to think that, but yeah, I'm going to make a channel soon to split up my content. That's what it is.
Oh yeah, that's a fine looking. Oh! Okay, no big deal. Stupid
Navy.
You gotta build fast.
The Americans are coming.
Yeah, that's one fine looking.
Tank.
Why doesn't mine look like that? Why must life be so hard?
How's your father's project coming along? I think he's almost done.
Japan is
Yeah,
America's
he's
father? Okay.
Japanese tanks are viewed as a meme. Believe me, I know. Just go read the comments on the Hago video. And given their performance at Konkangal and against the Americans, it's understandable how they got this stigma and how it seeped into the popular consensus. But I think this doesn't take everything into account and is sort of unfair to the designers. So here's a brief overview of Japanese tanks. Like almost all countries after World War I, Japan witnessed what modern warfare had become over those 4 years, and wanted to catch up in 3 major areas: tanks, planes, and radio communication. On the tank side, they did what just about everyone else did and imported foreign models post-war to test. These included a British Mark IV, a handful of Whippets, and a few orders of FT-17s. As these tanks arrived, Japanese Minister of War, this guy whose name I can't pronounce, embarked on an overall program of demobilization with the goal of quality over quantity in mind, taking a few divisions and remaking them into the 1st Japanese Tank Battalion on May 1st, 1925. This, though, received a lot of pushback from other branches and even the army itself due to the culture of the Japanese army. One thing needed to understand Japanese tank development, and the country's military actions as a whole, is the fierce competition between the branches. The Navy was always fighting with the Army, and for most of the war, more traditional generals in the Army fought the newer ones on this whole concept of mechanization, which they saw as a waste of time. Ugaki, however, pressed on. Once the Japanese had worked enough with the foreign models, they decided it was time to develop one domestically. And this task fell to Tomi Ohara, head of the new Army Technical Bureau. This, though, was going to be quite a task, as Japanese industry had at this point only produced trucks and some small tractors. The first model was Experimental Tank No. 1, which was deemed too large and slow but proved Hara's capability, although it was never mass-produced. The second model, that was deemed to be sufficient, was the first mass-produced diesel power tank in the world, the Type 89. Small side note about Japanese tank designations: the Japanese calendar, which they used at the time, began in 660 BCE upon the founding of the country. So for example, the Type 89 tank was introduced in 1929, which was the year 2589 in their calendar, and they used the last 2 numbers of the year in the name. There was also a method to naming the tanks once multiple vehicles began being developed in the same year, beginning with a designation for its role, such as Chi for medium tanks and the Chi-Ha, or Ho for SPGs like the Ho-Ro, and so on. I'll link something in the description that goes into more detail if you're interested. There was, however, a big question: how to use these tanks that at the time of the early to mid-30s were very capable in their design, but had no doctrine yet. And the same question that was being bickered over in Europe arose. Should they support the infantry, or be used as their own arm in a combined force? You know, the whole Britain v. France, which war theory is better thing. Now, although this answer is obvious now, it was not back then. The European countries had only been able to test their theories in war games so far, and the topic was equally contentious in Japan. But in 1933, they seemed to have found an answer. After initial gains into Manchuria, the Japanese force began to advance further into China proper in the Battle of Rihi. With the Chinese warlords' troops on the run, General Yoshikazu Nishi decided to pursue the chase with mechanized infantry to great effect by exploiting a breakthrough down the Jinzhou-Jiaoyang highway, disrupting Chinese defenses ahead of the main Japanese force.
So one thing I'm understanding from this is that Japanese tanks were made for a specific purpose, right? Because then Japan is not in Europe, right? They are in different place, fighting different enemy in a way, right? Fighting Manchuria at the time. So I guess they were made more, I guess, smaller, agile to support the troop, be fast in a way compared to the other ones, like being nowadays we say it's a tank. We just use the word for, I guess, something that is just like too strong, too sturdy, right? Like when we think of tank, we automatically think like tank must have the biggest and thickest armor, fat ass gun and slow. No, that's not how things work. Tanks are made sometimes to be fast as well. So basically, this tank, they basically made this to be more agile to support the troops rather than anything else. So yeah, I can see how they come into the play with the different European powers, right? It would be a different strategy. But yeah, I guess they didn't see that at the time.
Sound familiar? This, among another handful of uses of tanks, showed their usefulness in a combined arms assault. This vindicated Japanese generals in favor of the tank, with the independent mixed brigade being created, and also adding the Type 95 Ha-Go, the Japanese equivalent to the 7-ton infantry tanks being produced all over Europe, to their arsenal in 1936 after previous development starting in 1934. These lessons, however, were utterly ignored in 1937 under Tojo, who decided to spread out the armored force in a more infantry-centered attack plan. This change in tactics proved especially poor at battles like Zinkao against Central Chinese Army forces with proper anti-tank guns, who found the thinly spread Japanese tanks as easy and rare targets. Because of this, the Japanese High Command decided that combined arms doctrine was a failure, thinking of 1937 and not 1933. Because of this, the Independent Mixed Brigade was effectively disbanded, although tank production and development continued, with much of its resources being diverted to other branches. Due to this, tank development and increased production became more difficult and was mostly put on the back burner until two major things happened almost simultaneously. The first was Nomonhan, where the Japanese got a very bloody nose from the Soviets, showing the weakness of their armored force against a combined arms force behind Zhukov, and second, the effective use of combined arms tactics being used by the Germans to great effect in Europe that the Japanese had a front row seat to through the eyes of those sent to sign the Axis Pact. This prompted the Japanese High Command to reevaluate their stance, forming the mechanization headquarters to develop mechanized units and tactics. This, however, was too little too late, as with the upcoming drive into Southeast Asia and the attack on Pearl Harbor and the Chinese front bogging down into a stalemate, the Navy, the Army's rival, had received production priority, making the creation of new and better tanks impractical and nearly impossible, as the Japanese Army would be island hopping for the foreseeable future, and more ships and easily transportable light tanks would be needed. Hara was not
Yeah, you would understand why Navy would get preference. It's Japan, right? I mean, Navy is where most battles gonna happen, especially to the Western powers. So yeah, I mean, today's world, if you think of Japan, you think of one of the top two, automotive hubs, right? First, second, whatever. Other being Germany, right? I mean, Japanese, vehicles or any equipment is considered one of the most sturdy ones there is, right? If you buy anything Honda car, Honda bike, it's gonna last forever, right? I mean, that's how good they are. I mean, there's a reason why Harley Davidson got screwed in 80s or something when Honda came to the USA or whatever. So yeah, that is, I mean, in Japan, if somebody just if the bullet train comes a bit late, like a minute or two, you get a free ticket and basically a note to your employer or whatever that you will late 2 minutes because the train came late. I mean, that's the level of efficiency they are known for today. So yeah, it's not that Japan couldn't have made the best tank at the time. They were playing with what they thought was right, like supporting infantry and shit like that. But yeah, obviously that thing wouldn't work in the European theater, basically, right? If they have to find someone like Soviet or some other European country.
completely done though. Upgrades to the Type 97 were made to make it more capable in an anti-tank role, resulting in the Chiakai. And during the Burma campaign, the British would comment on the effectiveness of Japanese tank movements through the jungle, taking them by surprise with large mechanized attacks. What is it with the Axis and going through forests? Japanese tanks were also used to great effect in the Philippines in 1941. But overall, the sun had set on the Japanese tank project, with them using models that were years outdated for the duration of the war that paled in comparison to the Sherman, the main battle tank that the Japanese ran into from this point on. And this is the real reason Japanese tanks are seen as so bad. The point in the war where they are outdated and used sparingly is the point that, at least in the West, is given the most attention. And looking at this point, the Japanese look like they simply don't know how to design a tank. But in reality, the forces behind the curtain misread the situation entirely in the 30s, back when Japanese tanks were very capable, and came around, to the arguably more correct point of view, far too late to breathe life back into the Japanese tank program and set up new lines of production and develop new designs. There were a handful of more capable designs made later in the war, mostly ones stretching the Type 97 hull to its limits, that would have been more effective, but were retained for the defense of the potential invasion of the home islands and never saw service. So hopefully this video clears up some of the questions as to why Japanese tanks were so ineffective. There's a lot more on this topic, but I figured I'd cut it off here before it goes on for too long. For more info, I can't recommend Steven Zaloga's books enough. He covers everything in a very concise and interesting way, and I'll link them below. Also, for more information on the Ha-Go specifically, check out the video I did on it, and I plan to release a similar one on the Type 97 too. If you live anywhere in the Midwest and you would like to see some of these Japanese tanks up close, I implore you to go visit the Indiana Military Museum, who has both a Type 95 and Type 97 on display. They're actually having a Living History event that I plan to attend on Labor Day weekend, and they should have both tanks out for display at that time if you want to take a closer look, as well as running some of the other ones they own. As always, I would like to thank my patrons.
Yep, so there you go. Yeah, so obviously tanks, I mean Japan is known for its automobiles and mechanical things basically, so no way Japan sucked then. I mean, imagine if that's the case, Japan just point blank sucked there, didn't know how to make anything, and today they are this good. So yeah, obviously it's, basically they were fighting in different fronts than how it was happening in the, European theater basically. They were fighting in a different place, that tank worked at the start the way they intended, but yeah, eventually they realized that this is not going to work, they have to make more, but by that it was already too late. But yeah, alright, well, that was the Japanese tank meme by the channel Potential History. If you like my next one, don't forget to subscribe. Yeah, I'll see you next time.